Welcome to All the F Words,
a podcast where two writer friends, nearly 30 years apart, explore everything we give an F about. I'm Gabby Moskowitz.
And I'm Joanne Green. On each episode of All the F Words, we'll focus on a theme starting with the letter F. Things like faces, fertility, fake news, and fellatio.
We will share stories from our lives and our distinct generational perspectives and look to the experts for insights and ideas.
Today we're going to talk about freaks, what hippies called themselves in the 60s and 70s. Also Jesus freaks and freak shows.
That's a lot of freaks.
Hey, as someone who came of age in the late 60s, early 70s, freak has a particular meaning for me. And it's an endearing term. I can't wait, though, to hear what the term means to you, Gabby.
So when I think about freaks, I think I just think of it as kind of like an elementary school insult. You know, you're such a freak, or middle school, you know, or I mean, it wasn't something I said very often, but you know, I could see, you know, seeing someone, I don't know, being a little crazy or funny or weird and saying, you're such a freak, in like a friendly, funny kind of way. But it's not really a term I am I mean, I think I know what it means, but it's not something I say very often or have said very often. I guess the only other thing is if you say, I'm such a freak about, it means I'm kind of quirky about something or weird about something or really like something. But yeah, when you suggested doing this as an episode, I was very curious about the background of the word freak.
Well, when I grew up, freak was used the same way you just described. Certainly in elementary school, you're such a freak. It was weirdo. Mm-hmm. Freak was weirdo. Something abnormal. And what happened in the 60s and 70s was that the so-called hippies, and in general, I would say we didn't call ourselves hippies. That's what others called us. We called ourselves freaks. And it was a badge of honor to be different than the rest of society. So the point was, we're counterculture. We are going to make a change. We're part of a different tribe, and we dress a certain way, and we have a certain political viewpoint, and we like a certain kind of music. And there were all these things about the freaks that was shared. But I've got to tell you a crazy story. So while all that was happening, I was in high school and subsequently, but one summer, and I think it may have been like the summer between my junior and senior year, maybe even after I graduated, the guy who had been the big heartthrob quarterback for the football team, I will not say his name, but his first name was Danny, so I'll just say that, asked me out on a date and took me to a carnival that was in another town somewhere in Boston, and was very excited to go see the freak show. And I was so appalled.
Oh my God.
And I got really emotional and said, how can you find this funny? How can you look at people with physical, we called them deformities at the time, but now I would probably call them differences. People who were not able-bodied in the same way that we were, and that this was how they had to make a living, was putting themselves up there. I remember very specifically there was a woman whose elbow and knee joints kind of went in the other direction, and she called herself the Frog Lady, and he thought this was hysterical. And I started crying, and I said, take me home. We have nothing in common. I don't ever want to see you again. And he kept saying, you are the weirdest person I've ever encountered. I mean, it was such a memorable experience, but it was literally these two different views of a freak show. And up until this week, I didn't really know much about freak shows, but I had to dive in and do the research. Have you ever been to one?
No, I don't think I even knew. In fact, I remember finding out what a sideshow is, but that was just from watching The Simpsons, and there was Sideshow Bob, who was, I think there was Krusty the Clown, and Sideshow Bob, I think, was one of his friends. And I remember asking my parents, what is a sideshow? And I think that led to explaining to me what a freak show is. And then, but then I read this great book. What is that book called? It was an amazing book about...
Chang and Aang?
No. Now I got to Google it.
Oh, I'll talk about that in a minute too.
A great book. I read this. Well, I can't remember what it's called. I'll figure it out and we'll put it in the show notes. But I remember I read a really great book about a family that was part of a freak show, and I've never had direct experience with.
I don't recommend it, first of all, but interestingly enough, these were essential components of traveling exhibitions all throughout Europe and America throughout the Victorian period. And the showman was the key. The showman was kind of the MC and would really build up what you were going to see and how different this was than everybody else. It was like differences were fascinating. And also they made a big deal about the fact that these people with their disabilities could do supposedly normal things and that this was an extraordinary talent. So one of the famous acts in these early freak shows were the Siamese twins called Chang and Aang. And they were born in Siam, which later became Thailand, in 1811, and they were brought to America in 1829. And there's a fabulous book that tells their life story. And
are they
the original person?
Are they where the phrase, like the term Siamese twins came from? Were they like the first documented?
Yep.
Okay. Interesting.
I don't know about the first documented, but they certainly came to fame. And, not as though they were, really, it was like they were a freak of nature. That was the deal. So I highly recommend that book, and we'll put that in the show notes as well. Midgets were frequently advertised as being way older than they were, and bearded attractions, they called them, and the bearded lady.
They use the term midgets. I guess I'm not surprised, but that's certainly, we don't say that anymore.
Yes, they did. Exactly. That was the term that was used. Midgets.
Wow. I'm not surprised.
Little people.
Little people. Right. Wow.
So Jojo the Dog-Faced Boy was a really famous freak. So this was a boy that had a full beard. And this is crazy, but they did have this famous fake show that was called Harry Mary from Borneo. And actually, Harry Mary wasn't a woman, was really a monkey, but they were trying to make it seem like the monkey was a woman. Oh. Can't make this stuff up. Also, largeness in size was a big one. So people who were extremely tall were said to be giants. And so the larger or the smaller people were, the more they were sought after and were able to make a living. And it all changed dramatically with P.T. Barnum and his famous attraction. And this is the Barnum who became the Barnum and Bailey Circus. With his famous attraction called Tom Thumb, who was a little person. And this all happened when Barnum, who was American, arrived in England in 1844. He became an instant attraction, was presented to Queen Victoria on 3 separate occasions. The public went nuts. Freak exhibits spread all across Europe. They were in shop fronts. They were in music halls. They were traveling fairs. It was the sort of most popular form of base entertainment at the time. Wow. Crazy, right?
Wow. Yeah, I had no idea.
And they still happen in some places.
Really? Today?
As part of as part of county fairs, and yes, they still can be found today.
In the United States?
Probably not in your yes, but probably not in your neighborhood, I'm guessing, Gabby.
I'd be really interested to know what it's like for participants now. I'd be interested to know whether it's the kind of thing where it feels empowering and they're going to make money, and or whether it feels demeaning in the way that I think I would guess that it would.
I'm guessing it's a combination of those things. I mean, I think, first of all, nobody's getting rich on this.
Right.
So it is, I can only assume, a meager living, right, that somebody is making by doing this. But maybe they were born into a family that was part of, that whole sort of carnival, rodeo, traveling circus sort of subculture.
Interesting.
So maybe that is the world they know.
Yeah.
But it is, I mean, why do you think human nature hasn't changed that much? Why do you think it was so big at one point in the history, particularly of Europe, but America too? And now you don't even know that it exists anymore. It's so marginal.
Yeah, I think, why do I think that it's become marginal? Or why do I,
Well, both.
I mean,
why did it become marginal, and how do you explain its popularity? Because,
well,
I think human beings we don't change that much, right? Do we?
I mean, my guess would be that we don't need freak shows anymore because we have reality TV. I think that humans still love watching people act in a way that reminds us that makes us feel like we are better than them. We love that, and watching people with physical differences be forced to perform demeaning entertainment may not be something that's so common as an in-person event these days, but we still watch, there's that show, My 600-Pound Life. I can think of several different shows featuring little people that I haven't seen, but I can only imagine. I actually know somebody who was approached about appearing on it, and she ended up declining because it just was so demeaning. I think that we still definitely treat people with physical differences as we don't treat them well in our society, and often there are opportunities, or there are producers who take opportunities to exploit them for profit. And so I think if I was going to be kind of loose about it, I would say that we still have freak shows. They're just on cable TV.
Yeah, they're a little bit different. So the thing is, oddity fascinates us, and shock value is always a hook. Mm-hmm. It's a hook, right? It's a hook in books. It's a hook in movies. It's a hook in TV shows. People want to be shocked. That's why we go on roller coaster rides, right? We like that feeling of, right, and gasping. And when we see things that are outrageous or really different than anything else we've ever seen, it gives us something to talk about, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's what that guy was thinking.
Though,
the guy who took you to that freak show, maybe.
Which guy?
The guy who took you to the freak show? Danny something? From high school? Maybe that's what he was thinking.
Danny something.
He was thinking it would entertain you and make you laugh or something, or you'd have something to talk about. I don't know.
And I think there was no coincidence that this happened at the very time that I was sort of coming of age, questioning a lot of things about society and questioning the idea that someone's misfortune could provide entertainment for someone else. Or I won't even say misfortunes, just oddity or, physical difference could provide entertainment for someone else. And I think what was interesting was this use of the word freak, because I was feeling proud that I thought I was a freak. And here was a freak show, right?
Tell me more about that.
Was sort of twisting of the word. So when someone says the word freak to this day, to me, and I think people in my age group, check with your parents, it was like a badge of honor. It was being in a certain privileged club. It was a subculture. So it was Originally, and I did some research on this too, originally it was a component of the Bohemian subculture, which actually started in California in the mid-'60s and later became associated with the hippie movement. But the term is also used to refer to what were then called by some who wrote about it post-hippies and then the pre-punk period of the mid-'70s. So it's a sort of an all-encompassing range of disparate groups that included pacifists and politicized radicals, right? So there were it was crazy in a sense when you think about it because it included the people that wouldn't serve in the that would be drafted and then be conscientious objectors, saying that they couldn't go to Vietnam because they were pacifists, all the way on through to people on the radical left who were blowing up buildings on college campuses. All of those people were in this same sort of club of being freaks. And then there were people that were all back to the land and make everything organic and from scratch and canning and doing all that with the vegetables that they grew, right on through to the people who were experimenting with psychedelics.
Wow.
And the music also had a really broad range. It was progressive rock, but it was also sort of Grateful Dead, whatever you would call that music. I mean, so it had like almost country and folk elements to it. Freaks were the people who went to the rock festivals, the free festivals, the happenings, all of the different alternative gatherings that were happening largely for free. I mean, now when you look at what it costs to go to an outdoor concert festival like Outside Lands or any of these
hundreds of dollars,
any of these festivals, minimum. I mean, I think, and it's such a huge commitment, whereas then it was just, you just stuck your thumb out on the street, and if there was a festival happening, anyone who picked you up knew where you were going. You didn't have to say where you were going. They just took you there, and it was free. So very, very different world. But what gave birth to all that was kind of disillusionment with the lifestyle that had really come to be in post-war suburban America.
The uptight 50s and how, everything was.
So it was the uptight 50s. It was the consumerism. It was the home Mad Men. I mean, I think that's just sort of a phrase we can use now, but that sort of cigarette smoking, alcohol drinking, attitude toward about women, so many women feeling this is like just at the same time that this was happening, women's liberation movement was starting to happen. And, Ms. Magazine was talking about empowering women, writers like Betty Friedan. And we'll do a whole separate show on feminism, so I don't want to say too much there because it is, of course, one of my favorite F words. But
too.
All of this was happening, and there were many people who felt stifled by this idea of, driving in the car to your job, being in your job from 9 to 5, driving home, having the cocktail. Life was very predictable, and this is middle class, of course, I'm talking about, and kids who grew up in that world wanted something different. They were looking at a society that didn't seem to be that happy, right? Divorce was really prevalent. There was a lot going on that showed that people weren't happy with, having to always keep up with the family next door and get the newer car and all of that stuff. And in the meantime, there was a very unpopular war going on, and they were drafting young people. So it was a lot of things that I think came together all at the same time, that political views, modes of dress, taste in music, commitment to peace, truth, justice, experimentation with drugs, all of that happening kind of at the same time. It started in the mid-'60s in California. It zipped across the country in no time. I'm sure there are people in New York who would say it started here because that's always the way it is, right? But it definitely went on throughout the 60s and 70s and then kind of morphed into something different. in the 80s. But, there were some things like hairstyles were long. I mean, hair was long, always. And part of that was like, we don't care. We're going to be different. Clothing was brightly colored. There was a lot of role play with headbands and cloaks and caftans and sort of suggesting either, and this is, again, I wasn't thinking this at the time, but this is what's been written about since, either a romantic historical era or a distant region. All that combined with cheap clothes, jeans, army surplus. Before I went to college, my mom wanted to take me shopping for my college wardrobe, and we went right to the Army Navy surplus store in Central Square in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I got T-shirts and jackets and jeans, period.
Wow. That
was the wardrobe.
Women's jeans at the Army surplus, or was it just jeans?
No, it was all unisex in those days. They didn't jeans was it was a very different thing. It was all one thing. Jeans were by size, waist and length, and I don't know, they weren't cut specifically for men or women. I remember landlubber jeans in particular. I hope that's ringing a bell for somebody out there.
What are landlubber jeans?
Oh, they were really low cut and then bell bottoms. It was a particular brand.
And did they wear those in the Army, or that was just purely a fashion thing?
No.
Okay.
That was purely a fashion thing.
Well, we'll have to do an episode.
No, but
on fashion.
See, what was crazy about 100%. I don't have a lot to say about it. Hopefully, you'll carry.
Maybe we'll bring in a guest.
We might have to We might bring in a fashionista for that one. That would be great. But what I was going to say is, crazily enough, we were shopping in the Army surplus store, but you wouldn't like wear fatigues or anything like that because you weren't glorifying the image of the Army. So It was really yet another one of those it made no sense.
Right. Yeah.
Because you're also wearing beads, which everybody wore beads all the time, and flowers in their hair. And all of this was supposed to suggest that it was all about peace and life, things that were life affirming. But like you said at the very beginning, the word freaks also talked about things that people were really into. So there were eco freaks, there were speed freaks, there were Jesus freaks, there were guitar freaks. It kind of started being used as a synonym for like enthusiast or something, right?
That makes sense.
Then there's one more use of the word that we should mention, which is freaking out.
Oh, yeah.
So originally, the freak who experienced a bad hallucinogenic experience was said to freak out. Oh. So freaking out meant like losing control, acting abnormally. That's where it came from. And having a bad trip. And at all of these free festivals and rock concerts and all that, there was always a tent that you could go to if you were freaking out. And there would be people there who would try to calm you down.
Sounds like a fun place.
Freaking out was not something good. Freaking out was really scary.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was such a recent phrase. And that it's interesting that, no one ever says that person's having a bad trip to refer to somebody getting upset. Somebody might say, "Oh, you're tripping," or you're tripping out. But freaking out really has a totally different, like, "Oh, Dad's gonna freak," like that kind of. No one says that to mean that Dad's gonna do LSD. So I'm
right.
Yeah.
And what does it mean Dad's going to do? If you say Dad's going to freak or so and so is just freaking out. What do you mean?
It means they're going to get mad. It means somebody's upset or angry. Yeah. And that's an interesting jump.
If sometimes somebody's freaking out, it's because they're terrified.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or it could be the positive. It could be the positive. They could be totally excited, thrilled.
Yeah, it seems to just
She just found out that she got hired for that job. She's freaking out.
Yeah, it sounds like it's sort of just intense emotion about something.
So it's interesting. English is so crazy, and I think there's this great Finnish comic that does Oh, and we should link to this in the show notes as well. I can't think of his name right now, but I'll get it. But he's from Finland and does all this stuff about the craziness of the English language. Like he'll take a word like bullshit and give you the 7,000 different ways in which it's used, depending on who's saying it and in what context they're saying it, and how's a person who doesn't know English supposed to know all of this. And I think freak is one of those words where it can be anything.
I have a little side story that's loosely related to that, that I just have to share because it just happened. And I think that everyone will think it was very funny. So this past weekend, my husband and I went away for the first time since, the last time we had gone away, other than to deliver our second child. Thank you for the round of applause.
That was applause in the background.
We deserved it. We went away for a night. We had a beautiful trip up in Tamales. It was gorgeous. And my mom was helping my daughter. My mom came and stayed with the kids, and she was helping my daughter go to the bathroom and brush her teeth and stuff and before bed. And Anna is almost 4, and she's got like a little bit of like a 4-year-old speech impediment. Not everything she says is obvious when she first says it. And so we do this chart where when she does a good job with the various chores and things she has to do, and my mom was helping her go to the bathroom, and she said to my mom, Nana, before I go to bed, we got to do my chart. And my mom thought that she said, or Anna kept saying, I need to do my chart. And my mom thought she was saying, I need to do my shart, as in shitting and farting. And my mom couldn't understand her. She couldn't understand her. She was completely confused. And Anna kept getting increasingly upset. And she was saying, Nana, I need to do the chart, or the chart. But my mom thought she was screaming about needing to do a chart. And then my mom started crying with laughter. She couldn't stop laughing. And all of my mom's mascara ran down her face. And Anna said, Nana, you have black liquid all over your cheeks. I need to do my chart. And my mom couldn't get it together. So chart, English was very confusing.
It absolutely is. I think that someone needs to do a little series of the adventures of Anna and Nana. It's pretty good.
For sure. Yes. So anyway.
All right. I have to share what I learned about Jesus freaks because it's too good. And it's one of those things where I had not remembered that phrase. Have you even heard that phrase, Jesus freaks?
Yeah. Yeah. You'd never heard it before?
It was a big deal in the late 60s. Oh, no. I heard it. It was totally prevalent and pervasive in the late 60s, early 70s, but then I hadn't heard it for a really long time. So it was members of the Jesus movement. It began again on the West Coast. And it's not just because I live on the West Coast that I want to keep saying this. It's really what I'm finding in the research. Spread through North America, Europe, Central America. So prior to that, it had been what was called the Charismatic Movement. And it drew from mainline Protestants and Roman Catholics who said that they had supernatural experiences, like speaking in tongues, for instance. And so the Jesus freaks were often also freaks, right, who looked like freaks and listened to the same music that all the freaks did, but
like
were
hippies?
Christian. And absolutely. But it was broader than that. So it included lots of hippies and then lots of people who weren't hippies. They may not have called themselves Jesus freaks, but they were referred to as Jesus freaks. And so that whole movement actually influenced the development of both the contemporary Christian right and the contemporary Christian left. Wow. How interesting is that?
That is interesting. I'm curious, how much, I wonder how much, and I'm sure it was different from person to person, but how much they embraced the phrase Jesus freaks. Like, would they readily introduce themselves as Jesus freaks? We are freaks. We're a particular kind of freak. We're a Jesus freak. Or, when I think now if I hear the phrase Jesus freak, it's kind of a insulting way to refer to somebody who's very loud about their Christianity.
Ah, interesting. I don't know. I don't know. And I think there were probably plenty of people who identified as hippies who felt really comfortable with the phrase Jesus freaks, and then plenty who didn't. But it really led to the start of small religious communes all over the country, and different groups and churches that would form, often with a charismatic leader.
Yeah.
Often who would kind of dictate the behavior of parishioners or congregants. And but it was a movement, and it was going on. So anyway, kind of interesting the way the word freak has evolved and maybe even continues to. It's not unlike the LGBTQ movement owning the word queer, which when I was growing up, queer just meant you were a freak, you were odd or different. And then it became, it flipped, and the meaning was something said in pride.
Or
right?
bitch.
That I am queer, meaning bitch is another good one.
We've reclaimed it. It's
That's right.
It's not even like a gendered word so much anymore. It's like bitch magazine, it's all over the place.
There you go. Yeah. There have been times when I've called my dog that and then apologized immediately after.
So here's a question. Are you a freak? Do you consider yourself a freak? You still self-identify as a freak?
Not anymore. Not anymore. No. I'm a former freak. I still, I love all the documentaries about the 60s and 70s. Fred and I worked for KSAN Radio in the 70s, and it was like, I don't even know if we were using that word anymore. Maybe we still were, but it was certainly, counterculture, left of center, and now there's a book being written, a documentary being done, and so we're reliving some of those days, and it's pretty awesome because it was a wonderful feeling that you were part of a movement that was going to elevate honesty and truth and things that were natural, and the whole free love thing. Oh, there's an episode we need to do. Free love, write that one down.
There you go.
So yeah, all of that. Anyway, I don't think of myself as a freak. Do you think of me as a freak?
I think probably it's a part of your DNA, in the same way that like there's the part of me that is still at Camp Tawonga in 1997 is there too. It's your a part of your former self. Maybe you're an FF,
Great.
A former freak.
I'm going to own my inner freak. I'm going to get in touch with my inner freak.
I love it.
Fabulous. Thanks so much for listening to All the F Words. We are on social media, but first, even before you follow us everywhere, and Gabby will tell you what our little thing is, please review us and rate us, because we want to know what you think.
We do. And you can interact with us on social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at All the F Words Pod. We would also love to hear from you if you have show ideas, feedback, thoughts, you want to send us like a cool recipe or something. We are at allthefwordspod@gmail.com.
Take care. Have a good day.
Bye.
Far out, man.